Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the data scrolling across her monitor for the fifth time, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee. The signal pattern wasn't random noise. It couldn't be. After 15 years of scanning the outer solar system for signs of artificial structures, she'd finally found something that defied natural explanation. "Hey, Marcus," she called out to her colleague, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can you verify something for me?" Dr. Marcus Williams rolled his chair across the observatory's control room, his usual skeptical expression already in place. He'd been the voice of reason on countless false positives over the years, but this time Sarah knew it would be different. "Another anomaly?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Look at these harmonic patterns in the signal from object J2047. They're maintaining perfect consistency despite solar interference. Natural objects don't do that." Marcus leaned forward, his skepticism giving way to intense focus as he studied the wavelength patterns. The signal was coming from what they'd previously classified as a piece of space debris orbiting Jupiter's Trojan asteroids. But debris didn't emit coherent radiation patterns with mathematical precision. "Run it through the Sagan protocol," he said quietly, referring to their standardized procedures for validating potential artificial signals. Sarah had already started the process. Hours turned into days as they methodically ruled out every natural explanation. They brought in experts from other departments, each one arriving with doubt and leaving with barely contained excitement. The signal was real. More importantly, it was meant to be found. "It's like someone left a lighthouse in our solar system," Sarah explained to the hastily assembled board of directors 2 weeks later. "The signal pattern increases in intensity whenever any artificial object approaches within a certain range. It's responding to our probes." The room erupted in overlapping questions. How long had it been there? Why hadn't we detected it before? What should we do about it? Admiral Helena Rodriguez, the recently appointed head of the United Earth Space Force, silenced the room with a sharp gesture. "Dr. Chen, in your professional opinion, is this a threat?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "The object appears to be dormant except for this beacon. If whoever placed it there wanted to harm us, they've had decades, maybe centuries to do so. I believe it's an invitation." "Or a trap," someone muttered. "Perhaps," Sarah acknowledged. "But consider this. The signal's complexity increases with each probe we send. It's not just detecting our presence, it's gauging our technological capability. We've passed some kind of threshold." Admiral Rodriguez's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "How quickly can we mount an expedition?" The question triggered another wave of protests. It was too risky, too soon, too far. We needed more data, more preparation, more time. But Sarah noticed that the Admiral was looking not at the executives raising objections, but at the engineers in the room who were already pulling up ship specifications on their tablets. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the observation deck of the UES Curiosity, watching Earth shrink behind them. The ship represented humanity's most advanced technology, a fusion-powered vessel capable of sustained acceleration that would get them to the Jupiter Trojans in weeks rather than months. The crew was small. Sarah and Marcus to study the object, Captain Anna Patel and her bridge crew to handle the ship, and a small contingent of UESF personnel led by Lieutenant James Carter for security. 15 humans total, carrying the hopes and fears of their entire species. "Hard to believe we're really doing this," Marcus said, joining her at the window. "First physical contact with alien technology. Ready to make history." Sarah smiled, but her mind was already racing ahead to the challenges they'd face. The signal had continued to evolve during their preparation for launch, becoming more complex, almost like a language teaching itself to be understood. She'd begun to suspect that whatever they found wouldn't just be a passive artifact. "I think history's already been made," she replied. "We're just the first ones going to read it." The journey to Jupiter was tense but uneventful. They used the time to study the latest signal patterns, which had begun organizing themselves into distinct mathematical sequences. Sarah worked with the ship's AI to decode what she increasingly believed was a form of communication. It's like it's teaching us how to talk to it, she explained during one of their daily briefings. The patterns contain embedded symmetries that correspond to basic physical constants, universal concepts that any technological civilization would recognize. As they approached the Trojan asteroids, the object finally became visible to their instruments. It was smaller than expected, perhaps 30 meters in length, with a crystalline structure that seemed to shift and flow despite being solid matter. No signs of active power sources, Lieutenant Carter reported, but the material composition. It's like nothing in our database. The surface is covered in what appear to be molecular-scale structures. Captain Paddle brought them into a holding pattern 5 kilometers from the object. The signal had changed again, becoming a clear sequence of mathematical instructions. Sarah worked through the night with the ship's computers, checking and double-checking her interpretation. "It's a docking protocol," she announced finally. "It's telling us exactly how to approach and interface with it. The precision is incredible. It's even accounting for our specific ship's mass and configuration." The debate about whether to attempt docking lasted less than an hour. They had come too far to stop now. Captain Paddle began the approach sequence while Lieutenant Carter's team prepared for possible emergency scenarios. As they drew closer, the object's surface began to shimmer with patterns of light that matched their ship's approach vector. It was actively guiding them, adjusting its own structure to accommodate their docking procedure. "Final approach," Captain Patel announced, her voice steady despite the historic magnitude of the moment. "Docking clamps ready. Dr. Chen, any changes in the signal?" "Signal is stable," Sarah replied, though she had noticed something new in the pattern, a subtle shift that suggested the object was preparing for something. All parameters within expected ranges. The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud that resonated through the ship's hull. For a moment, everything was still. Then the object's surface began to pulse with light, and the signal changed completely. "New pattern emerging," Sarah announced, her fingers flying over her console. It's a data transmission. Massive amounts of data, but organized, structured. This isn't just a beacon. It's a library or an archive, or..." She trailed off as the first translated segments appeared on her screen. The message was simple, but its implications were staggering. "Welcome, children of Earth. You are ready to learn of what awaits you." The crew exchanged glances, each person feeling the weight of the moment. Humanity had just taken its first step into a much larger universe. But as Sarah studied the continuing data stream, she realized this was more than a simple first contact scenario. The object was sharing information about threats and wonders beyond their imagination, and humanity's response to this knowledge would determine not just their future, but perhaps the future of all intelligent life in their corner of the galaxy. "Well," Marcus said softly, "I guess this is where the real work begins." The alien archive pulsed with ribbons of light as it transferred data into the Curiosity's systems. Sarah had been awake for 36 hours straight, fueled by a combination of adrenaline and synthetic caffeine as she worked to process the incoming information. The archive wasn't just sending raw data, it was teaching them how to understand it. "It's like it's building a translation matrix in real time," she explained to Admiral Rodriguez during their daily quantum link briefing. "The more we learn, the more sophisticated the information becomes. It's teaching us how to think differently." Marcus appeared behind her, his usual skepticism replaced by barely contained excitement. "Show her the stellar maps." Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing thousands of interconnected points of light. "These are populated systems, Admiral. Or at least they were. The archive contains historical data spanning roughly 50,000 years. And here's the concerning part. Watch what happens when we animate the data chronologically." The points of light began to wink out, cluster by cluster, spreading like a wave of darkness across the galaxy. Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward in her quantum projection, her expression grave. "Natural phenomenon." "No," Sarah replied. "These systems didn't die. They went silent. Something made them stop communicating, stop expanding. The pattern is too systematic to be natural. A predator species? The Admiral asked. Not exactly. Sarah highlighted a particular cluster of systems. These civilizations didn't show signs of warfare or destruction. They just stopped. Their development flatlined. Some regressed technologically. Others seemed to turn inward, abandoning space exploration entirely. The archive calls it the Great Silence. Lieutenant Carter, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Ma'am, we're detecting increasing energy signatures from the archive. It appears to be waking up. As if responding to his words, the crystalline structure of the archive began to shift, its surface flowing like liquid metal. A soft hum filled the ship as new patterns of light emerged, forming what looked like circuits or neural pathways. The archive isn't just a database, Sarah realized, her eyes wide. It's an artificial intelligence. It's been dormant, waiting for a species capable of understanding its message. The quantum projection of Admiral Rodriguez flickered. Dr. Chen, if this thing is waking up, I need to know right now, is this a threat to Earth? Before Sarah could respond, the archive itself answered. Its voice resonated through the ship's communication systems, synthesized but distinctly feminine and eerily familiar. I am the librarian, it said. I was created to preserve knowledge and guide emerging civilizations. Humanity has shown remarkable potential, but you are also in remarkable danger. The crew tensed, but the voice continued, its tone almost gentle. The threat is not from me, nor from any external enemy. The greatest threat to any species is the path they choose when confronted with the true scale of existence. Holographic displays sprung to life around them, showing scenes from countless alien worlds. Species that had achieved technological marvels, built Dyson swarms, mastered faster than light travel, all eventually succumbing to what the librarian called cosmic despair. When civilizations discovered the true vastness of space, the apparent emptiness between points of light, many lose their way, the librarian explained. Some retreat into virtual worlds of their own creation. Others fragment into isolated enclaves, paralyzed by the enormity of the cosmos. The few who continue to explore often lose their connection to their original purpose, becoming cold and calculating, sacrificing their essence in pursuit of pure efficiency. But why show us this? Marcus asked. Why not let us develop on our own? Because humanity is different, the librarian replied. Your species possesses a rare combination of traits. Technological innovation driven by emotional investment rather than pure logic. You dream, yet you also build. You fear, yet you continue to explore. You compete, yet you also cooperate. This makes you uniquely suited to understand what my creators discovered. The archive's surface rippled, and a new hologram appeared. A massive structure floating in deep space, its design unlike anything they had seen before. This is the Nexus, built by my creators before they too fell silent. It contains the key to preventing the Great Silence, but reaching it requires a species capable of maintaining their essential nature while advancing technologically. My purpose is to find such a species and guide them to it. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying we're candidates for this mission? You are more than candidates, the librarian replied. You are the first species in 10,000 years to approach this archive with both the technological capability to understand its message and the emotional resilience to process its implications. But there is more you must know before you can decide whether to accept this responsibility. The holographic displays shifted again, showing a timeline of Earth's potential futures. In one branch, humanity continued on its current path, eventually discovering FTL travel independently, only to fall victim to the same cosmic despair that claimed so many others. In another branch, they accepted the librarian's guidance, but lost their unique characteristics in the process, becoming just another cold, calculating species. But there was a third branch, one that glowed with particular intensity. This, the librarian said, is the path where humanity maintains its balance between advancement and essence, between logic and emotion, between exploration and connection. This is the path that leads to the Nexus. Admiral Rodriguez's projection straightened. And what happens if we reach this Nexus? That, the librarian responded, depends entirely on what humanity chooses to do with what they find there. The question is, are you ready to learn what that might be? Sarah looked at her crewmates, seeing the same mix of fear and fascination on their faces that she felt in her own heart. They had come seeking knowledge of alien life, but instead they had found a test, one that would determine not just humanity's future, but perhaps the future of all intelligent life. The quantum link chamber aboard the Curiosity had never been so crowded. Holographic projections of Earth's top leaders, scientists, and military commanders filled the space, their translucent forms overlapping as they argued about humanity's next steps. The librarian's revelation had sparked a global debate that threatened to tear the international coalition apart. "We cannot risk Earth's security on the word of an alien eye," the Chinese premier insisted. "For all we know, this cosmic despair is a fabrication designed to manipulate us." "And what if it isn't?" Sarah countered, her patience wearing thin after hours of debate. "The data we've analyzed supports everything the librarian has told us. The patterns of civilizational decline are consistent across thousands of documented cases." The UN Secretary General raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Chen, you've spent the most time studying the archive. What's your assessment of its trustworthiness?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "The librarian could have destroyed us or manipulated our technology the moment we docked. Instead, it's been transparent, even about the risks. But more importantly, it's given us something no other civilization received: a choice." The room fell silent as the librarian's form materialized in their midst, its crystalline avatar shimmering with mural patterns. "Your caution is wise," it acknowledged. "But time is not unlimited. The journey to the Nexus will require significant preparation, and there are complications you should be aware of." New holograms appeared, showing a region of space near the galactic core. The Nexus is not unguarded. Other species who succumb to cosmic despair still exist, some having evolved into forms that actively resist any attempt to change the status quo. They believe the Great Silence is preferable to the chaos of unrestricted expansion. "Hostile aliens," Admiral Rodriguez said grimly. "Now that's something we prepared for." "Not like these," the librarian corrected. "These beings have had millennia to develop their capabilities. They are not numerous, but they are formidable. They call themselves the Architects of Silence." The holograms showed massive structures that seemed to bend space itself, ships that could redirect stellar energy, and beings that existed as much in higher dimensions as in normal space. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she realized the true scale of what they were facing. "So this is why you chose us?" Marcus asked. "Because we're too stubborn to give up even against impossible odds." The librarian's avatar shifted, showing what appeared to be amusement. "I chose you because humanity has a unique capacity for finding unconventional solutions. The Architects of Silence expect logical responses, predictable strategies. They do not understand species who act on intuition, emotion, or what you call gut feelings." President Chen of the North American Alliance leaned forward. "You're saying our unpredictability is an advantage?" "More than that," the librarian replied. "Your species has a remarkable ability to innovate under pressure, to find strength in diversity of thought, and to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming odds. These qualities make you not just candidates for reaching the Nexus, but perhaps the only species capable of using what you'll find there." The room erupted in fresh debate, but Sarah noticed something in the librarian's data stream that others had missed. "There's more, isn't there? Something you haven't told us yet." The librarian's avatar dimmed slightly. "Yes, the Architects of Silence are aware of Earth's potential. They have been monitoring your development. If you reject this mission, they will not allow your civilization to advance independently. They will ensure Earth joins the Great Silence, one way or another. Chaos erupted in the quantum link chamber. Some leaders called for immediate military mobilization, others demanded diplomatic initiatives, and a few suggested destroying the archive to hide humanity's potential. Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos. How long do we have? The architects move with precision, not speed. The librarian answered. You have perhaps 5 of your years before they reach a decision point. After that, their response will be inevitable. Sarah watched the faces of Earth's leaders, seeing the weight of this choice in their expressions. This wasn't just about exploring the galaxy anymore. It was about humanity's right to determine its own destiny. There's something else you should consider, she said, drawing their attention. The librarian didn't just choose us for our potential. It chose us because we're at a crucial point in our development. We're advanced enough to understand the challenge, but not so advanced that we've lost our essential nature. We're unified enough to act globally, but diverse enough to think creatively. We're scared of what's out there, but brave enough to face it anyway. She pulled up the data showing humanity's possible futures. This isn't just about survival. It's about proving that intelligence doesn't have to lead to despair. That understanding the universe doesn't mean losing our humanity. We could be the species that breaks the cycle. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Even the librarian's avatar seemed to pulse with anticipation. Finally, the UN Secretary-General spoke. We need to put this to a vote, not just among leaders, but to all of humanity. Everyone deserves a say in a decision this momentous. A global referendum, President Chen mused. Risky, but appropriate. The question is, how do we present this to the public without causing panic? We tell them the truth, Sarah said simply. All of it. Humanity has faced existential choices before. We've risen to world-changing challenges. Now we face the biggest choice of all. Do we accept our role in the galaxy, or do we hide from it? The librarian's avatar brightened. You continue to demonstrate why you were chosen. Few species would trust their entire population with such a decision. As the leaders began planning the referendum, Sarah turned to Marcus. Think we're ready for this? He smiled grimly. Ready or not, I don't think we have much choice. But you know what? I wouldn't bet against humanity. We've got a pretty good track record of doing the impossible. Sarah looked at the holographic display of Earth, peaceful and blue, unaware of the momentous choice it faced. In a few days, everyone on that planet would learn that they weren't alone in the universe, and that the universe was counting on them to help save it from itself. 3 months after the global referendum, Earth was transformed. The vote had been decisive, 78% in favor of accepting the librarian's mission. But no one had anticipated how dramatically this knowledge would change human society. The fear and panic many leaders had predicted never materialized. Instead, humanity responded with an unprecedented wave of innovation and cooperation. The public revelation of alien life and the challenge ahead had given Earth something it had lacked for generations: a common purpose. Sarah stood in the new Global Space Command Center in Geneva, watching holographic displays track the hundreds of new ships under construction in orbit. The remnants of old space agencies and private companies had merged into a unified effort that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The architects of silence won't expect this, she murmured, studying the unusual designs of humanity's new fleet. Instead of building traditional warships, they had taken a radically different approach. That's rather the point, isn't it? Marcus replied, joining her at the display. He'd been leading a team studying the librarian's historical records, looking for patterns and weaknesses in how the architects operated. They expect logical responses. We're giving them poetry instead. The ships being constructed weren't just vessels of exploration or combat. They were expressions of human creativity. Each one incorporated art, music, and cultural elements from Earth's diverse civilizations. The librarian had confirmed that such designs would be nearly impossible for the architects to predict or counter, as they operated on principles the ancient beings had long forgotten. Admiral Rodriguez strode into the command center, her uniform bearing the new insignia of the United Earth Fleet. Status report on Project Harmony. Sarah pulled up the latest data. The quantum resonance tests are exceeding expectations. By incorporating musical harmonies into our shield frequencies, we've created defensive systems that actually become stronger under attack. The Architect's energy weapons should theoretically reinforce our shields rather than depleting them. And the Dreamcatcher arrays. Marcus highlighted several orbital platforms, online and functioning. By combining human brainwave patterns with quantum sensors, we've created a detection system that can spot higher dimensional incursions. The Architects won't be able to slip past us through subspace. The Admiral nodded approvingly. The librarian was right. Our illogical approaches are producing results that should be impossible by conventional physics. Speaking of which, how is our guest? The librarian's avatar materialized, its crystalline form now incorporating patterns inspired by human art and architecture. I continue to be amazed by humanity's innovations. You've achieved in months what other species failed to accomplish in centuries. We're good at improvising. Sarah smiled. And having a deadline helps focus the mind. Indeed, the Architects have noticed your preparations. Their response is confusion. They cannot comprehend why you would incorporate inefficient artistic elements into military technology, or why you would base defense systems on music theory. Admiral Rodriguez's eyes gleamed. Good. Confusion means hesitation, and hesitation gives us time. How long until the First Fleet is ready for the journey to the Nexus? Sarah checked the construction schedules. The lead ships will be ready in 8 months. We've named the flagship Humanity's Dream. Appropriate, the librarian commented. But you should know, the Architects will not allow you to reach the Nexus without a challenge. They will test you. Try to prove that you are no different from other species who failed. Let them try, Marcus said with unexpected fierceness. We've got something they don't understand. Oh, and what is that? Hope, Sarah answered. Not blind optimism, but real hope. The kind that makes you keep trying even when logic says you should give up. We've built our ships with hope in their very design. She brought up the schematic of humanity's dream. Its hull was inscribed with poetry from every human language. Its engines operated on principles derived from dancing. Its neural interfaces were based on the patterns of children's laughter. To the Architects, it would appear nonsensical, even mad. We're not just building ships, Admiral Rodriguez explained. We're building symbols of everything that makes us human. Each vessel carries art, music, literature, all the things that the Great Silence tried to strip away from other civilizations. We're not hiding our humanity. We're amplifying it. The librarian's avatar pulsed with what seemed like pride. You understand better than I hoped. The Nexus is not just a physical destination. It's a test of whether a species can advance technologically while retaining their essential nature. Well, Sarah gestured at the growing fleet. I'd say we're keeping our essential nature intact. In fact, we're celebrating it. New reports flowed in from around the world. The global education system had been revolutionized, combining technical knowledge with creative expression. Art and science were no longer separate disciplines but worked in harmony. Children learned physics through dance, mathematics through music, and engineering through storytelling. The ships under construction weren't just humanity's defense against the Architects. They were humanity's statement to the galaxy. Each one carried the hopes, dreams, and creativity of Earth's cultures, transformed into technology that defied conventional understanding. The Architects expect us to either cower in fear or respond with brute force, Admiral Rodriguez said. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen before. A civilization that turns its greatest apparent weaknesses into its greatest strengths. Sarah looked at the fleet of ships, each one a testament to human ingenuity and imagination. We're not just going to survive the journey to the Nexus, she realized. We're going to change the very nature of space travel. The librarian's avatar brightened. Now you begin to understand the true purpose of your selection. The Nexus does not need another species that has sacrificed its soul for progress. It needs a species that can show the galaxy a new way forward. As they watched the construction platforms orbiting Earth, Sarah felt a surge of pride. Humanity had taken what could have been a crisis and turned it into a renaissance. They weren't just preparing for a journey. They were redefining what was possible. The architects of silence would expect a species driven by fear and logic. Instead, they would find something unprecedented, a civilization that had embraced its humanity as its greatest strength. The void between stars erupted in a symphony of light as humanity's dream led Earth's fleet through what should have been impossible. They weren't just traveling through space, they were dancing through it, their ships moving in harmonic patterns that turned the fabric of reality into an instrument of motion. Sarah stood on the bridge, watching as the quantum resonance drives pulsed in time with the gathered thoughts and dreams of billions back on Earth. The fleet had been traveling for 3 months, each day bringing them closer to the Nexus, and each day proving that humanity's unconventional approach had been right. Contact. Marcus called from his station. Multiple dimensional signatures consistent with architect vessels. The bridge crew tensed, but Admiral Rodriguez remained calm. Begin the Symphony Protocol. Let's show them what we can do. The fleet's formation shifted, ships moving into positions based on musical harmonies. As the architect's massive vessels emerged from higher dimensions, humanity's response was not to raise shields or arm weapons, but to begin what could only be described as a dance. The librarian's avatar appeared, its crystalline form resonating with the ship's systems. The architects are confused. Their energy weapons are charging, but they cannot get a target lock. Your ship's movements make no logical sense to their targeting systems. Sarah smiled. The fleet's defensive pattern was based on a combination of classical ballet and quantum mathematics, making their movements simultaneously beautiful and unpredictable. That's because they're looking for military logic. We're giving them art instead. The first architect vessel fired, a beam of pure energy that should have annihilated anything it touched. Instead, humanity's dream absorbed the attack, its hull inscribed with poetry beginning to glow as the energy was transformed into something new. Return their greeting, Admiral Rodriguez ordered. The fleet responded not with weapons, but with a coordinated burst of quantum-harmonized signals, effectively a song translated into pure energy. The architect vessels recoiled, their perfectly ordered structures disrupted by the sheer creativity of the human response. They're attempting to communicate, the librarian announced. This is unprecedented. The architects have never attempted dialogue with a rising species before. A signal reached them, cold and precise. Your approach is illogical, inefficient. It defies all established principles of space combat. That's humanity for you. Sarah transmitted back. We have a habit of defying established principles. Would you like to see what else we can do? The fleet shifted again, this time into a pattern based on children's dance games. The massive ships moved with impossible grace, weaving through space in ways that made the architect's perfect formations seem rigid and lifeless in comparison. You risk everything with these emotional displays, the architects responded. The great silence is order, predictability, safety. Is it? Admiral Rodriguez challenged. Because from where we stand, your perfect order looks a lot like fear. Fear of change, fear of chaos, fear of life itself. The librarian's avatar pulsed with excitement. They're withdrawing. Your response has forced them to reconsider their fundamental assumptions. The architect vessels began to retreat, their perfect formations showing signs of disarray. But before they vanished back into higher dimensions, they transmitted one final message. You will be watched. The Nexus. Perhaps it chose correctly this time. As the threat receded, the fleet regrouped and continued their journey. The Nexus itself became visible a week later, a massive structure that seemed to be made of light and thought more than matter. As they approached, Sarah realized why the architects had been so determined to prevent species from reaching it. "It's not a weapon or a power source," she breathed, studying the readings. "It's a library of consciousness, a record of every species that managed to advance without losing their soul." The librarian's avatar expanded, merging with the ship's systems. "Now you understand. The Nexus is not a destination. It's a beginning. A place where species can share not just their technology, but their art, their music, their dreams." The architects feared it because it proves that their path of cold logic is not the only way forward. As humanity's dream docked with the ancient structure, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. They had not just survived the journey. They had proven that humanity's greatest strengths were not their technology or their weapons, but their creativity, their emotion, their ability to find beauty in the impossible. The Nexus began to respond to their presence, its surfaces coming alive with colors and patterns that reflected the collective consciousness of Earth. It wasn't just accepting them, it was celebrating them. "So what now?" Marcus asked, standing beside Sarah as they prepared to explore the structure. Admiral Rodriguez smiled, looking at the holographic displays showing the messages of hope and excitement pouring in from Earth. "Now we do what humanity does best. We create, we explore, we dream. And maybe, just maybe, we show the galaxy that the answer to cosmic despair isn't silence. It's song." Sarah finished, understanding at last why the librarian had chosen them. As the first teams prepared to enter the Nexus, Sarah thought about how far they'd come. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, not by becoming harder or colder, but by embracing everything that made them human. They had turned their art into shields, their music into engines, and their dreams into reality. The Great Silence had met its match not in superior firepower or advanced technology, but in humanity's unlimited capacity for wonder, creativity, and hope. As Earth's fleet orbited the Nexus, their ships still moving in patterns that defied logical explanation, Sarah knew they had done more than just reach their destination. They had proven that the path forward wasn't through the cold calculations of the architects or the fearful retreat of fallen civilizations. It was through the warm, messy, beautiful chaos of being purely, uniquely, unashamedly human. The adventure that awaited them within the Nexus would be just the beginning. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not by changing who they were, but by becoming more of who they had always been. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all.